Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted once again to be joined by Natasha Meikle and also Lawrence Connolly for the ACSOM Bulletin. We were told to brace ourselves for an announcement this morning. Natasha, was it a bit of a letdown, or are you quite happy with the way things are developing?
Yeah, it's good that we're seeing some movement with McKay coming in earlier. With all businesses, high-level individuals leaving, joining, integration is key, and it's good that we're going to get this handover process of them coming in earlier before Lawwell leaves. But I think a lot of fans were expecting an announcement on someone else today. After the buzz on Friday, I think, we were more of a when rather than if we were going to get the announcement about how, and it doesn't seem like that's happening today. So there is a bit of concern starting to sneak in. Like we were talking about on Friday over the weekend, it seemed like a done deal. But the longer there's no announcement, it's a bit of a concern about what these hold-ups are. Why is there no announcement? And that bit of doubt starts to creep in. So I think the fans would like to hear something sooner rather than later before more of these concerns creep up and people start to get a bit uneasy. And yeah, what are these hold-ups? What are these hurdles we're trying to overcome? The rumours over the weekend, or certainly yesterday, is that it's over this director of football or head of football operations or technical director role. How is everyone going to fit together? If we're already relatively far down the line with Harkin, is that an issue for Howe? Does he want to bring his own people in? So yeah, a few concerns starting to creep up, I think.
I was loath to mention any negatives last week, really? Especially when it looked as though Eddie Howe was incoming. You'd had these discussions. He was the candidate that the club wanted. And I just didn't want to look at any negatives because, it's the last thing we need, actually, as Celtic fans at this moment in time. We're looking at all these changes. The big CEO change is afoot. Dominic McKay has announced, Celtic have announced rather, that he's coming in a couple of weeks' time. He'll start his position as the CEO on the 1st of July. And I've said in the past, I'll come over to Lawrence because, Lawrence, you'll remember, like myself, Fergus coming in and the size of the task that faced him when he came into Celtic. And I remember in an earlier interview that we did with David Lowe, David saying there was a moment in time where they were both standing in an office at Celtic Park looking out and Celtic fans were queuing up to buy shares, and the magnitude of the job that they had taken on, if they didn't know the size of it before, they certainly did at that stage. People were coming in with their savings to buy shares and make sure that they could be part of this rebuild. Now, it's a completely different rebuild, Lawrence. It's not as though like back then it was a financial issue where we were staring down the barrel of a gun. We were saved from financial distress by Fergus McCann. This is completely different. But when you're looking at it, some of the positions that Natasha's already mentioned, director of football, technical director, or do we have a director of football and a head of recruitment? We'd certainly need a head coach and then all the coaching staff that comes with that. And that's not just the football side of it, all the technical staff that will come with that. And that's before we look at the player overall. And that will happen in a post-COVID, post-Brexit landscape. So, Lawrence, it's some size of job he's taken on, is it not?
Yeah, definitely. But McKay will have done his due diligence, won't he? He'll understand what he's walking into. He'll know his own capabilities, his strengths and weaknesses, and what he can bring to the role. And Celtic will have, done similar. What the hold-ups are, as Natasha said, the rumours over the weekend, it's, is it Fergal Harkin? Is it Richard Hughes? Who's going to step in? Apparently we've not got the back to Tenure now. So there's still a few names kicking about. Is it director of football? Is it technical director? Surely we've decided the structure. Or is the structure going to be decided by the incoming head coach, incoming manager? Is that the problem, that we've decided the structure that perhaps the incoming manager wants to tweak a bit?
Well, one thing you said there in relation to Dominic McKay coming in, and yeah, I'm sure he has, obviously, as the club have done, all the due diligence. Do you think the fact he's coming in early, Natasha, is an indication that he's coming in early to ensure that the Eddie Howe appointment doesn't fall at the last hurdle?
maybe he's needing to come in to see it over the line. I'm concerned that he has done his due diligence. He's taken one look around and thinks he needs to come in months earlier, which wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. Fair play to him. But I am a little concerned if the Howe deal needs McKay to come in to get it over the line. What can that possibly entail that can't be done before McKay gets in? The concern for me about, McKay coming in early, well, it's good. He's not going to be the one, or he should not be the one making the footballing decisions. That's where we need to get a move on. Like we've touched on, we need these people in, like the head coach, the technical director, the head of football operations, whatever it's going to be. They're the people we need in place now. So while it's good that McKay's coming in early, we need the footballing staff in early, because McKay shouldn't be having an influence over that. Yes, he'll have an influence over who these people are going to be, who the head coach is and things like that. But the footballing decisions need to start getting made as soon as possible, and that's not McKay's role. So maybe him coming in earlier is going to get some deals over the line in terms of directors and head coaches and whatever the setup's going to look like. But he's not coming in, until mid-April. So we're still a couple of weeks away from that. Does that mean any announcement on a head coach or technical directors or head of operations? Is that going to be another couple of weeks away? Because the clock is ticking. And if we're waiting on McKay coming in to make these decisions and announcements, it just gets moved further down the line, and we can't afford to move anything further down the line at the moment. So yeah, I'd like to see an announcement on perhaps Howe or Harkin or whoever it's going to be. I think the fans would like that announcement to be this week, even if that means before McKay comes in. So I've still got my fingers crossed for that.
Well, I think when you look at the date, the 19th of April, you think, well, we're all geared up for the big announcements coming in the football sense. I don't think we can wait 2 weeks, and I don't mean that in an impatient way. I just think we can't wait 2 weeks, because there will be other clubs looking at this situation. There'll be other clubs looking at the fact that Eddie Howe is a prime candidate for a number of jobs, I would suggest, that are available or about to become available in English football. It's my understanding that he's been offered numerous jobs in the last 9 months at championship level. I think now there are other clubs within the Premiership down south looking at someone like Eddie Howe. It was interesting this morning. Before I ask you this one, Lawrence, I'm digging that T-shirt, incidentally, that you must have got on the black market. So tell me where you got. Tell me where you got it, so I can get one.
Penalty spot in Sword Street, which obviously COVID is closed, but it's still available online, mate.
Excellent.
Speak to Kevin at the penalty spot.
Or somebody out there might want to buy me one as a wee gift. But Eddie Howe, so I woke up this morning, I'd heard all the same rumours as everyone else. You're trying to add 2 and 2 together, and you think, right, 7 o'clock this morning, an announcement. It didn't quite happen. Then, obviously, we hear that Dominic McKay is coming in early. I think that's brilliant. As we've already heard on this podcast, he's already started to engage with Celtic supporters, which I think is fantastic. We heard that last Monday on the bulletin, that he's phoning Celtic supporters at home, which is tremendous, because I actually can't, and it's no disrespect to any individual, I can't ever see a time where I'd be sitting in my living room and Peter Lawwell would give me a wee phone just to make sure everything was okay. I don't think that was ever going to happen, but the fact that Dominic McKay's already done that prior to being in position, astounding, great start, and that's only one occasion that we're aware of. There could be other occasions where he's getting in touch with Celtic fans, he's engaging with them, he's trying to get an idea and build a picture of how we're feeling, how disenchanted we have been over the last 12 months or so. So, Lawrence, I was watching with interest this morning the news coming through, and there was a couple of interviews actually with Simon Francis and also David James. Now, you remember in Neil Lennon's early days, he tried to sign David James. Excellent goalkeeper in his day. I was always a fan of David James. And both of them were talking about their memories of Eddie Howe whilst both players were at Bournemouth. Quite interestingly, David James said that his understanding of people is second to none. He's tactically superb, and he's within the top 2 managers that he ever worked with. The other one being Harry Redknapp. So David James obviously holds Eddie Howe in high esteem, but there was a caveat to this, and it was that should Celtic drag their heels any longer, there might be an issue because clubs in England are watching this situation with interest. If indeed it is all around the director of football and the fact that Celtic may be further down the line with their own choice, as has also been suggested today, do we go with Eddie Howe and go with his men?
Listen, Gordon Strachan touched on it as well, but it may be Howe dragging his feet. We don't know. I mean, Strachan said Howe's agent will be out there now going, listen, I've got a firm offer from Celtic. Can any of you beat it? It's the market we live in. It's do we go with Howe's men? It depends what promises you've made to other people. If someone else has been promised the job, and it's a kind of difficult situation for him if he's currently in employment. He's told his managers, by the way, I'm going to Celtic, or it's out there that he's going to Celtic, and then Celtic come back and go, actually, we know we made you a promise that it was yours, but tell your current employer you're staying. So I think you've got to kind of try and be fair to all parties. But for Howe, appointing his assistant manager and coaching staff has got to be within Howe's remit. Whether he appoints or how much he has in the technical director or director of football, it's completely different. It's almost as if he's pointing the guy above him, which is strange. I know football's a strange world, but it'd be strange for that to happen. Is he saying that he can only work under one director of football? Is that because he's experienced at Burnley? I don't know. But we all want it done sooner rather than later. But if I was either party, I'd be drawing a deadline at some point this week, because it doesn't all go well statistically in recruitment. Negotiations that drag out over a long period of time. It's probably something that's getting forced in than something that's kind of meant to be. And we need to either say, look, it's going to work or it's not.
That's interesting. We're getting a bit of inside Jen on the recruitment world there, Natasha, from Lawrence, who is a recruitment specialist. Talking of recruitment, I mean, let's not forget, and the one big reason I would like to get the manager in, as well as the fact that someone might try and pull the rug from under our feet, is that we need that manager to come in because of the huge task ahead of him in terms of the personnel. The assessment process, we've been speaking about even just the loanee situation, Natasha. You look at that game the other night, and we'll touch on it again, whereby we've got two loanees playing right and left back. And that's simply because we don't have enough players. Otherwise we'd have Anthony Ralston at right back, the only other recognised right back, right? Someone else pulled me up for that, saying surely we've got a youth player. Well, tell me who it is, because there isn't a youth player who's played that position for the first team. And if the crop of the cream of the crop were played in January, and that was the best that we've got, then I don't have much hope that we've got a right back who could step in at this moment in time. On the left hand side, we've got Greg Taylor and Bolly Bolingoli when he comes back, and when he's back to full fitness. Once Laxalt goes back to AC Milan, if indeed he does go back. But these kinds of decisions, these need to be made by the incoming manager. So for me, it's imperative that without any other delay, and the fact, let's not kid on, the fact that we've drawn Rangers in the Cup. I mean, the Cup is potentially our only hurrah this season, Natasha. We need to get a manager in who can assess this squad and decide who's staying and who we're going to cash in on over the summer months. But also, we need to try and win this trophy.
Absolutely. It's the sort of, last chance of this season to gain any form of positivity. So we have to be in the best position possible for that. If I'm being realistic, I'm not sure that even if we do get here, we won't be coming in until the summer. I'm concerned they would let this run on until the end of the season regardless, with Kennedy in place as interim manager. And it sort of, raises the question now, will Kennedy be here next season as well? There's been a lot of discussion about this, whether Howe is in fact going to keep Kennedy and perhaps Strachan as part of the setup. And for me, the setup's just becoming a bit big there. If we're talking about Celtic are already far down the line with Harkin, is he going to come in? Is Howe going to come in with Hughes as well? There's rumours that Howe also wants to bring in his own scouting people. There's also the rumours that he's going to bring in people like Peter Grant and Bartley, and there's also rumours that he's going to keep Kennedy and Strachan. This is turning into a massive team. We can't have all these people, and in the dugout. So who is it going to be? And I'm just starting to lean towards the position more that he will be retaining. If he comes in, Howe would be looking to retain someone like John Kennedy. And before, I've been, sort of critical of John Kennedy on here a lot. I fully think that he's equally as culpable for the disaster of this season. He has been on that training pitch and in that dugout for this season that's went so badly wrong. But to play devil's advocate, I'm actually going to give Kennedy a little bit of credit here. He has been around for 6 trophy-winning seasons. Yes, this one has been a disaster. Yes, I do think he's culpable for some of it. But, he's widely touted as a very good coach by, a lot of top managers. He gets a glowing write-up from all the players. And maybe, with all the changes that are looming, the change of CEO, manager, backroom staff, captain, squad, we talked about Scott Brown as needing to stay to create that stability, somebody who gets the club, who can have that influence in the background. Maybe the feeling around the club and with Howe is that the person to do that role is Kennedy. So maybe there is a job for Kennedy in this backroom setup after all. And if there is, then maybe it's him who's assessing the squad right now and going to advise Howe and the team on that when they come in. So I am starting to lean towards the possibility that Kennedy does have a role here and that we will see him as part of the setup next season.
I'm glad you brought that point up because I think it's one that needs to be discussed. Now, John Kennedy is obviously surviving the Neil Lennon regime. We spoke after the game against Falkirk, the fact that all around the fact that John Kennedy has been in charge for 4 games, and in that time we have had 97 shots at goal, and we have only scored, and let me double check this, 5 goals, 3 of which were against a team in the 3rd tier of Scottish football. That's a slight concern. I would suggest that if you're scoring 5 goals and about 100 shots that you've not got your shooting boots on. But I do actually take your point because John Kennedy is an interim manager. He stepped in because the manager who was in place was at a stage where it was untenable. His position was untenable. And Kennedy has obviously learned over the period of, Ronnie Dyler, Brennan Rodgers, Neil Lennon, a way of approaching setting up a team, a way of approaching the style of a team and perhaps a culture. But he's only been part of that. So he's never been able to implement what he believes is a philosophy for Celtic Football Club. Whether or not his own philosophy matched with any of the 3 predecessors, who knows? But I think I was of the view, Natasha, that when Neil Lennon went, so should John Kennedy and Strachan have gone. That was my view at the time. It might have been a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater style, whereby it was just a rash decision had it been made. And it was all about stabilising the ship and settling it all down until the new man comes in. It does seem likely that there will be a role for John Kennedy. Now, whether or not he goes away, and he's maybe at that stage now where I think he's 38 now, where he's got loads of experience as a coach at Celtic. There might be an opportunity for him to move on. And, I think in the past there was a suggestion that he was in line for the Hibs job when maybe Jack Ross got it. So maybe that would be better for him from his own perspective. Does he see himself as a Celtic manager in the future? Because, I think you'd need to go away and prove yourself elsewhere if you're ever to be a Celtic manager. But I get it from the continuity. There's so many changes. And we'd already said, I was saying, we should keep Scott Brown for that very reason. Obviously, those in power disagreed, or Scott Brown disagreed himself. Is that continuity going to come from people like John Kennedy? Lawrence, when you look at the past, going through the boot room mentality of the club where ex-players were part of Jock Stein's backroom team, and it continued through Billy McNeil's time with John Clark obviously being his trusted aide. That was broken up, I guess, when Liam Brady came in, but I always do feel that it's important to have a constant. Now, is that just me being over sentimental? A lot of people will be in the comments, I'm sure, saying, no, you just need to get the best people in for the job. What's your thoughts on that, Lawrence?
I think there's probably going to be a bit of a mix. There's going to be some continuity. It's just at which level. You don't clear out everyone because you change manager. Surely, as a club, we've now got to especially after Brendan taking almost everyone, we must have put some kind of contingency plan saying, look, this is what changes and this is what we need to be ready for future events. You know, if all the management staff leave in the future, how do we maintain some form of continuity? So I definitely think that there's a mix to be had. But going back to the point of assessing squads, whether that's Kennedy's job just now, if the managers that we have interviewed, if that hasn't been part of the interview process, our interview process isn't right and it's not the right managers, because it shouldn't just be about the budget for them. They need to see what's there in a squad, what they can work off, and from that say, well, this is what I can do with the budget and this is what I can achieve. Otherwise, if they're just saying, yeah, just give me a budget of 20 million, don't really know what's in your squads, haven't looked at it, but the 20 million will solve everything. We're definitely speaking to the wrong people, and we're definitely conducting the wrong process. So I think anyone, whether it's how Keane will have been watching videos, will have been looking at players, been asking for stats on players as part of this recruitment process. If it hasn't, you've got to really wonder what we've been doing for this period of time. Because if that's left out, is it all just about negotiation packages and who comes in, not knowing really what you're coming into? For me, that wouldn't make sense, and it would be the wrong way to do it. But yeah, back to your question. Yeah, I think there could be a role for Kennedy. He seems to be highly thought of. Definitely him, Strachan and Lennon didn't work together. But just because he didn't work as part of that three doesn't mean he couldn't work as part of another team like he did when Brendan was there.
Good point. Now, see, when we're looking at assessing the squad, I was looking through, right back to Neil Lennon's first time in charge. Now, you might disagree with some of this, but I always feel that there's an opportunity when a new manager comes in for one or several players to, step back up to plate. Guys who might have fallen out of favour, who look to be on their way out sometimes. And I think that when Neil Lennon came in first time round, at that stage, although Tony Mowbray had made Scott Brown his captain, I think we started seeing the real Scott Brown under Neil Lennon first time round. Again, open to people disagreeing with that. And I think when Ronnie Deila came in, he improved a lot of players, but the one that always springs to my mind is Callum McGregor. McGregor was so far out the picture. He had been loaned out, I think, for about 18 months to Notts County. There was a suggestion that he would leave permanently. Carlisle were interested in buying him. Ronnie Deila puts him in a team and he develops and he continues to develop under Brendan Rodgers. The one player that I felt might have been surplus to requirements when Brendan Rodgers came in, but who proved me wrong, was James Forrest at that stage. And I thought Forrest started really being a main player for Celtic. What players at the moment who a lot of Celtic fans might have written off, Natasha, do you think the introduction of someone like Eddie Howe could revitalise? I mean, there's so many players there that obviously have been below par this season.
Yeah, there's a few that spring to mind, but probably the one that comes into my head first is Mikey Johnston. We saw a year or so ago now, he started to look promising. He started to look like, a great product of our youth system that was going to come through and really break into the first team and make an impact. And then, of course, he got his injury and then he just fell away. And I just wonder if Lennon wasn't the right manager to get the best out of him. And for someone who looked like they had so much potential, perhaps a better coaching setup, or someone who just works better with him, like you've talked about Deila doing, someone who just clicks with Johnston to get the best out of him, I think he could become a real asset. So I'd be excited to see a new coaching setup work with Mikey Johnston. We've said it regularly this season that one thing we are lacking is that cutting edge in the final third, the real sort of out-and-out winger to go past the player. Obviously, losing Forrest through injury was disappointing, then Johnston got injured as well. But if that is the role we're lacking, if we can sort of really develop Johnston into that role for next season, I think he could be a great option. So I look forward to seeing someone like him working under Howe as well. And like Lawrence has touched on, I think Howe will have a few of his own ideas lined up. You're not getting this far into discussions without thinking ahead to next season and what you're going to do. One of the big decisions for me that he'll have to make in terms of the squad is on Callum McGregor. Is he going to come in and keep him as his captain? I think likely yes, but then there's also the rumour that he's going to bring his own ex-captain in Cook. And again, I don't mind the idea. We've talked before on here about whether McGregor is the ideal candidate for the captain's role, and I'm not entirely sure he is. I'm not sure that his qualities align with what we would be looking for in a captain, or certainly the roles of the captains we've seen in the past. And I'm not sure really that it's something McGregor thrives under. And I think for me, it's important, again, we've touched on it in terms of the backroom staff, that Howe has his own men around him. I think that that's just important for us hitting the ground running next season. And that's both off the pitch in terms of, his number 2, being able to choose that himself, the people round about him and his coaching team, but also the people on the pitch. With such a big rebuild exercise on the horizon, I do want Howe to be bringing in people that he wants, or that he's worked with before. I think that'll lead to more cohesion going into the summer, and then we can hit the ground running more easily next season. So if he does want to bring some of his ex-players or players that he's worked with before in with him, and perhaps make one of them his new captain, not something I'd be totally opposed to.
When you think back, I think, Rodgers brought in a couple of guys that he had known from previous clubs. He had worked with Sinclair, obviously, and, it does work because you know what you're getting with that, and it gives you, as a manager, the familiarity. It's an interesting point around Johnson because, like everyone else, since Howe's been linked to Celtic, I've done all the usual, watching all the interesting coaches' voices, videos, etc., reading all the in-depth, long-form articles, and it would seem that Eddie Howe does like the wide men. He likes to utilise wide players, Natasha. So that's an interesting one because it's an important season. This season for Mikey Johnson, isn't it? I mean, I know he's been hamstrung with the injury and all that, but he's completely fallen away from the first team squad. So it's maybe good timing for Mikey Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, when we're looking at that situation with players being developed, Lawrence, it's one of the things that, was a big criticism, I think, of many Celtic fans towards Neil Lennon, was that he didn't develop a lot of the kind of younger talent. I've heard some people saying the same about Eddie Howe, but, when you look at his record, there certainly were players, maybe not all coming through the Bournemouth setup, but players that he brought in, developed and sold on at Bournemouth as well. So is that a concern for you?
Yeah, I think it's getting one team on the park, and whether that's developing or purchasing. Developing's preferable to buying in when it's cheaper and it allows us to have a kind of longer term plan. I think how, if he likes to work the wingers, it's something we've not really had this season. I think it's something Lenny asked for at the beginning of the season, 2 wingers to come in. And it wasn't delivered by either a recruitment policy or a CEO. It didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Who could he revitalise? He could probably revitalise Callum McGregor, because I don't think Callum's had the best of seasons. Or if we look out on loan, what about Shved and Jack Henry? That they've been getting great results where they've been. And if that would be an example of us using the loan system to the best effect, I think everybody was excited when we signed Shved. He had a good goal scoring and assist record. Questionable attitude in training when he got here. Questionable attitude in training when he went out in loan. But his loan manager said that he had a frank conversation with him, and it seems to have adjusted Shved's attitude. Could he come back with the better attitude and better application in training that's going to allow him to get a first team start or be in the first team squad? It's all to play for I think, everyone in that squad. Because who's performed at the level we'd expected them to perform this season, or who's outperformed? Welsh maybe has outperformed the level we'd expected. Anyone else has performed better than we have? Perhaps Taylor. I think he's been solid and good assist record. You're struggling after that. Who's at the level they should have hit, or who's went beyond the level they should have hit?
Honourable mention for David Turnbull, I think, Lawrence. But yeah, you're right. You're spot on. There's a lot of players there that didn't really reach the heights you would have expected. But interestingly enough, on the Callum McGregor question, Brendan Rodgers has been linked again with Callum McGregor. Rodgers has come in. He appeared on the Robbie Fowler podcast. So he obviously, avoided ACSOM and went straight to Robbie Fowler instead. But he spoke about his departure from Celtic. He spoke about a number of things which were quite interesting. But he is apparently back in for Callum McGregor and also Odsonne Edouard. Now, I'm kind of resigned to the fact that Edouard's on his way. It's probably the right time for the player. Unfortunately, we won't get what we thought we were maybe going to get a year ago, I don't think. But that's more to do with the current financial climate than anything else, I think, Natasha. But, Callum McGregor, if someone like Brendan Rodgers was to come in for him, I thought the unthinkable was Tierney leaving Celtic. I then thought it was unlikely that Brown would leave. You know, I thought he was going to finish his career at Celtic. Do you honestly see Callum McGregor in somebody else's jersey?
We might have to get used to the possibility. I didn't think I'd ever have to imagine Scott Brown leaving Celtic and joining another Scottish team. I thought that was definitely out with the realms of possibility, but here we are. We will have to face that next season. Will we have to face similar with McGregor? It's entirely possible. I think it's going to be up to Callum. He either goes down one path now, which is that a new manager comes in, makes him his captain, and he signs up to another couple of years at Celtic, and that's it. Or he sees now is the right time to make this move down south and really test himself. You know, he might be looking at players like Armstrong and how well he's doing at the moment and thinking, this is my chance to give that a crack. Will it come up again if I don't move now? Maybe not. So I think a lot of it might be up to Callum. And equally, if the situation arises that we previously discussed, in that Howe comes in with his own captain or a player lined up to be captain, would that turn McGregor's head and think, maybe this is the out for me, maybe it is time for me to pursue something else if he's not getting signed up to that role? Maybe. I think largely it's going to be down to Callum. I'm sure he will have, pretty quickly we'll be having discussion with the new manager who comes in. You know, he is, to all intents and purposes, the captain now. I'm sure if Brown is having this discussion with the new manager coming in, McGregor would be heavily involved in that, given Brown's outgoing status. Mm-hmm. So I think during those discussions, McGregor will probably decide his own future. And to be honest, I can see it going one of two ways. I can picture him moving down to Leicester to work with Rodgers. But like I said, I think it'll depend on where he sees his career going now, because I think he's at a bit of a crossroads, and it could be his time to depart.
Interesting times. You know, as you say, I never ever thought I would be watching an Aberdeen side that potentially are captained by Scott Brown with maybe even Lee Griffiths up front. We'll need to see how that one pans out. But, Brendan Rodgers, the fact that he may well be interested in these players is making me go back to the original point. Get Eddie Howe in right now, because he might actually change the minds of some of these guys. You know, the other player that I was reading about this morning on Callum McFadden's blog was Chris Ayer. Lee Clark managed them at Kilmarnock. He's basically saying this is a boy who could walk right into the Premiership in England. So there is going to be interest in players like that. And as you say, Natasha, some of them are going to be looking at their own cycle at Celtic and thinking, I'm coming to the end of my time here and it's time to make that move before I get stale. Also, we can't get fooled again. We can't be in a situation 2 or 3 months down the line where 2 or 3 players want to move and we convince them to stay, and they're just not firing on all cylinders. Now, Lawrence, I'm going to ask you there. I mentioned Lee Griffiths, and again, he is heavily linked to Aberdeen. 30 years of age, a natural-born goal scorer, probably our best goal scorer at the club. With regards to Griffiths, he played the other night. He was misfiring, I've got to say, against Falkirk, probably because of a lack of match sharpness. Not so much match fitness, but match sharpness. He just didn't have that sharpness about him. Does he have a future at Celtic, Lawrence? And if not, shouldn't we be trying out players like Ajeti to see if he is going to be part of Celtic next season?
For me, Griff to Aberdeen, what could Aberdeen afford to pay? 1.5, 2 million? What you're going to get up front for next season for 1.5, 2 million, it's going to have the capability of Lee Griffiths. So for me, I think he would have a future, whether it's as a first team starter or a striker that's coming off the bench. I think we're really short up front. Yeah, I'd like to see Ajeti get more game time between now and the end of the season and see what's actually there. When he first came in, he scored a few goals. He was almost 1-2 at Ball, which is some time ago. It's almost as far back ago as Lee Griffiths' 40-goal season. So, we need to see what's up front and what we've got. But I can't see the sense in letting Griffiths go for 1 million or 2. I just think we'd be better keeping him. What he'd give us from the bench or as part of the squad's going to be worth a lot more than that 1 million or 2, especially when it looks like Eddie's out the door. Polish Paddy, who knows, and Ajeti's, we don't know if he's going to cut it or not. So that's a forward line just now, isn't it? Or forward department of 4 forwards. We're definitely losing one, and we're unsure of 2 of them. So on that basis, keep Griff.
See, the big thing for me, the way you're talking there, I don't disagree with that, Lawrence. Yeah, you're right. You're talking about a deal probably for 1.5, 2 million. You could never replace the goals that Griffiths gives you with that kind of money, Natasha. But when you're looking at the value of Lee Griffiths, or even Olivier and Cham, who I guess will be shown the door at Celtic, Tom Rogic, the guys, these players' values have dropped dramatically from where we were maybe this time last year.
Massively, yeah, absolutely. I think I probably disagree with Lawrence actually on this. I think it's time to let Griffiths go. Even if that is getting 1 or 2 million, and let's put it towards whoever Eddie Howe wants his striker to be. Griffiths is unlikely to want to sit on a bench and get a little bit of time here and there. He probably sees him getting more game time at Aberdeen and fancies the move himself. And like we've already touched on, we can't afford to keep players who don't want to be here. It didn't work out for us last season, and it won't work out for us if we do it again this season. If Griffiths wants to go to Aberdeen, I don't want to put the brakes on that and have an even unhappier Lee Griffiths around the club, getting a bit of 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I think we're as well cutting our losses on that one. And yes, the value might be low. It might only be 1 million if Aberdeen can even afford that. But I would let him go. He didn't bring us very much this season. He's not showed me any signs that he's getting back to the goal scorer that we think he can be. Cut our losses, take what we can get for him, and look towards putting that towards a new striker. Yeah,
and I suggested, although our colleague Colin Watt totally disagreed with this one, that it might be a make-weight for the Lewis Ferguson deal that has been mooted. He seems to divide opinion among Celtic supporters, but I think that we have for too long kind of overlooked the Scottish talent. And I think when you look at the impact that David Turnbull's had this season, there are talented players out there. You just got to look at the Scotland squad. You've got to look at some of the players who have gone down south and made a big impact that we could have had for, I'm not going to say a pittance, but certainly when you compare it to the value of the likes of John McGinn now, we could have had him for £3 million. I mean, so I don't agree with Colin on the Lewis Ferguson one, and I could see that being a good deal for both parties if we use Lee Griffiths in that way.
Yeah, no, that would be a deal that suits me. I would be quite interested in seeing Lewis Ferguson coming in. If you look around the league, not looking any wider than the Scottish League, if you look around the Scottish League right now, the most natural replacement for Scott Brown may be Lewis Ferguson. And again, you'd hate to have another saga like someone like McGinn or even Hickey, and look at these young players going off to England or abroad and feel like you've missed out on that again. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see Celtic miss out on another one. So if there is any interest in Ferguson coming to Celtic and Griffiths going the other way, then yeah, that would definitely be something that interests me. Look how well Turnbull's done since he's come in. I don't see why Ferguson couldn't have the same sort of impact. And in terms of the Scottish player thing, I think we need to find the right balance between players like, perhaps in midfield with McGregor and Turnbull and Ferguson and that type of player. And if we just sort of enhance that with, the sort of other type of player, if we're talking like that, if we're looking at players like El Yunusi and Edward and Ayer, so if we have a sort of blend of these good Scottish players who are going to be great for us, and also some of these players who we might have to get in on loan, or players like Ayer who we bring in younger, develop them, give them game time here, and then sell them on for a higher value. So if we have a model that balances both of that well, I think that's what we need to try and look at doing for next season. And Ferguson could certainly help come in and fill that quota of the Scottish player that we're looking for.
Yeah, I would welcome him. I think he's an excellent talent, one for the here and now, not so much the future as well. Jake Ryan, welcome to the show. You're commenting on YouTube, and you can comment on YouTube, Facebook or Twitter. If you are on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe. We are growing the channel on a daily basis. You say that Eddie Howe isn't even Bookie's favourite anymore. Should we be worried, or have the bookies made a big mistake? Who's worried, Jake? Who's worried? McGrory, keep having that sinking feeling. Lowell's doing his usual haggling over a fiver, and Howe will walk away. That is a slight concern. Jonathan Brown, the longer Howe takes to be confirmed, the more doubts I have. There's a wee thread developing here in relation to the Eddie Howe deal getting over the line, and Jake Ryan, Sky Bet, Kennedy 8 to 11. Howe odds on 1-1. And when you look at the situation that we are in with how and the concern that's creeping in, Caplo Mark, are we in danger of messing this whole appointment up? Very concerned. I go back to the situation with Dermot Desmond. And again, he comes in for a lot of criticism. He gave a rare interview fairly recently, just the other week there. Not so much in the eye of the storm of the Celtic fans, but in the aftermath of the fury amongst the Celtic fans this season. He's given an interview, and I'm kind of inclined to suggest that he probably gave it because Brian Dempsey rattled his cage and he came out and gave an interview. And I sometimes, I say sometimes, I think back to that flag, that banner that the Green Brigade put out about being asleep at the wheel, in the picture of Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell. So that's asleep at the wheel. And, Celtic not strengthening from a position of strength. When we're on top, when we're dominating. And that's when we should be making these changes and making sure that the structure's in place and we're working on a philosophy and a culture. And it seems to only happen when, the wheels fall off the bus. And that's exactly what's happening at the moment. Now, the way that someone like Dermot Desmond can obviously alleviate these fears is making sure that the deal is done. And someone might come in and say, that's not how it works in a PLC and the board, etc., etc. Now, what I would say to that is, who are you trying to kid? We know who makes the decisions at Celtic. You tell me a board member that makes any decisions at Celtic. It's all down to the two men in charge of the club who are the decision makers, really. And they can influence the rest of the guys that make up the numbers. That's the way I've always viewed it. So if Dermot Desmond is serious about coming in and making a big statement, surely, Lawrence, he's the man that needs to push this one through and make sure it happens.
I think so. He's done it before with the Neil and Rogers, hasn't he? When he's interviewing. So I think everybody knows Desmond 30-odd%, but he's got the financial institutions behind him. So yeah, although he's not the majority, in effect he is, and he makes the decisions, and the CEO's there to run the club for him, so he's not having to run it day to day. Hopefully, he appoints the right guy, and we don't get this stage again where he's having to intervene in a management appointment. But yeah, it's up to Desmond. Will he be more minded? The rumours are his son's joining the board with the changes in Holland and Belgium leagues. He's pulled out the Atlantic League, so the straight access to Champions League for next season's champions. Perhaps he sees this is a time where he can get a better return if he was to do the unusual and invest some of his cash into the business as an investment rather than just buying, uptaking a new share issue, increasing his shareholding. But I think it is down to him. If he doesn't do it, you've got to ask, well, what role is he playing?
When you look at the situation that we're in, Natasha, the fact that the fans need positive news to come in, and obviously Dominic McKay coming in early is positive news. On the horizon, there's always this situation with regards to renewing season tickets, and surely the club, in fact, of course they do. They know that this is really hinging on, and I don't mean a marquee signing, I don't mean a high-profile manager, because I'm not interested in Eddie Howe because he's a high-profile manager. I'm impressed in his approach to the game. I'm impressed with his ambition, his philosophy, the way that he wants to challenge himself. It sounds as though every interview that I've read or heard from ex-players who have worked under him, he's the first in the morning, the last to leave at night. He's a 24/7 manager. And I think that's what Celtic needs. Yeah,
I mean, like everyone else, I watched the YouTube videos, I watched documentaries, I read the interviews about him. The accolades he gets are outstanding. From people who know a lot about football, and you look at Jurgen Klopp's previously come out and said he's one of the best coaches that he's seen in the game. I mean, for someone like that to give you that kind of accolade is a big deal. Players that he's worked with, coaches that he's worked with, they all talk very highly of them. I'm going to caveat that and say so does everyone who's worked with John Kennedy. But I think the people who are talking about how are the people you stand up and listen to and take notice of when it comes to football. And I think the board just need to look at, or the club need to recognise the good feeling gathered in the Celtic fans on Friday afternoon when this announcement started to look imminent. The fans were excited again. There was a bit of positivity. We all just have to look at our own social media pages. There's a buzz about, when this sort of announcement was looking like it was on the horizon. And that buzz has been missing all season. It's been flat and miserable. And now, the thoughts of someone like Howe coming in has given everyone this lift. The board need to capitalise on that. The absolute last thing they can afford to do is get this wrong and for this to let this slip. If we don't appoint Howe after all of this, I think all the good feeling gathered with the thought of Howe will actually reverse and go further back than it was before we started thinking about getting Howe in. The disappointment would be well on a par with all the disappointment we suffered this season, to be honest. But I think there's a serious risk of how damaging this could be if they don't get this deal across the line now after all of this build-up.
You're right. The circumstances we're in at the moment, if, and I say a big if, because I'm going to try and remain positive on this one, because there's no other way to be, is there really? You can't imagine a situation where this doesn't actually happen. And as is suggested by Pat O, Eddie Howe might defect to China. We never know what's going through anyone's minds. We know that money can be a massive motivator for individuals. But at 43, and with his managerial record as it stands, he, I think, as a manager, isn't at that stage, is he? He's not at the stage where Rafa Benitez had won in various countries European trophies, for example, or Slaven Bilic had managed for years in the top flight of English football. These guys have gone to China, and let's be honest, they've gone there for the money. They've just basically gone there, and you get the impression that as soon as an opportunity arose again in English football, they would come back. So they're over there just for the money. It's a nice wee stepping stone until they get an opportunity to come back to English football. I don't think Eddie Howe is there. I don't know the guy personally. You're trying to read through the lines. You're reading the interviews. You're listening to ex-players talking about him. And I certainly hope he's not at that stage. If it does happen, Natasha, it will be a group chat message to see who wants to come on for an emergency bulletin as I'm driving into my work at 7 o'clock in the morning. Paul Cockwell is talking about he would love Griffiths at Hibs. Paul, of course, is a Hibs fan, but don't think we can afford him. It would be good, Griff and Nisbet up front. The situation with Lee Griffiths, it's an interesting one time-wise as well. Looking at Bernadette, who totally agrees with Natasha, Griff has to go. And the situation with Griff, there's another really good point coming up here. McGrory reckons that he might come back to haunt us. Yeah, absolutely. That would be one of my fears. But we're looking, here we go. It's Mark Bradley looking at the wages. Griff would prefer to sit on a bench for 18 grand a week than play for an Aberdeen at 5k a week. Now, there is a situation here, Mark, where ordinarily I would agree with that, and I think that's just the way modern football, and we all know the situation with it being a short career and you've got to really make hay while the sun shines, etc. We all know that, but I think Griffiths is in a situation at the moment where he's out of favour for Scotland, whereas he worked so hard to get into the plans under Gordon Strachan. Lawrence earlier on mentioned that pivotal season where he scores 40 goals 5 years ago now under Ronnie Deila, and Gordon Strachan didn't want to play him for Scotland. He was the best striker that we had and he was struggling for goals. Scotland were struggling for goals. He eventually breaks in. He has that memorable situation where he scores the 2 goals against England. 2 incredible goals. The only Scottish player that could have scored those 2 goals, I think, at that time. So when he's looking ahead and he's looking at probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him to play at a major finals for Scotland, he needs to be playing games. So he would need to weigh up the 18k a week that undoubtedly he's getting at Celtic and the wage drop that he would be getting at Aberdeen. He would need to, I guess, look at how they could structure a deal. Are they able to structure it insofar as, Johnny Hayes was able to go back to Aberdeen and take a wage cut? So there's ways of structuring deals where that's been offset. So they're going to actually have to pay him double wages next season. But Lee Griffiths would need to look at this from a professional perspective. Does he want to play for Scotland in the finals of a major tournament? Because if it doesn't happen this year, it never will for Lee Griffiths. He's 30 years of age. He's only got 1 year left on his deal at Celtic. So he could be saying, well, where will I be in a year's time? Albeit the club won't have to pay a transfer fee. How can he negotiate a deal at 31? He's a year older. He's maybe not had much football, next season with Celtic. So although I take Mark's point on this one, Natasha, I think if he's got any ambition, Lee Griffiths probably should be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard, you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. But I think if I was Lee Griffiths at this stage of my career with the Scottish, issue on the horizon and wanting to get back into that squad, I would be moving. Yes, of course, he's going to get a higher wage at Celtic, but this is probably his last chance to get game time again, his last chance to get into a major tournament with Scotland. I think he would regret it if he didn't move now, which is why I think he will be pushing for this move to Aberdeen. And like I've touched on before, if he wants to go, let him go. Similarly to players like Hayes and Gordon, they just wanted to play football again. And I think Griffiths is more likely to be like that as well, to be honest. I think he'd rather take the wage cut, go to Aberdeen and get more game time.
I think Gordon's a good example as well. Natasha, he's a player that last season we could have been, this season rather, I'm already writing it off by calling it last season. This season, we could have been doing with a Craig Gordon. You still see his ability. Again, talking about Scotland. Lawrence, is Scotland such a big pool? Surely playing at the finals of a major tournament will be at the forefront of Lee Griffiths' mind when any decision is made.
Yeah, I think it'll play part of it, but it's also Lee's last ever deal, isn't it? Whatever he decides. Does he go to Aberdeen and drop to 5k, or does he think, I can speak to the new manager, whoever it's going to be, I can have an impact at Celtic, and at the end of this season, I can sign a last deal as a free agent and increase what I'm going to get for the future. Scotland, we aren't awash with striking talent. If he's coming off the bench and scoring regularly for us, or if he believes enough in his own ability to think, well, Eddie's gone, I don't rate Polish Paddy, and I don't rate Ayeti, so starting place is mine now, unless they bring in a big name, but at least I'm going to be his number 2. That's enough for me to get back in the team. Or is it playing for an Aberdeen team that he won't get as many goal scoring chances? Is it all playing for Celtic, coming off the bench and scoring, or potentially starting and playing in Europe? Then at the end of the season, he gets to negotiate a deal as a free agent. So there's a lot of things for Lee to weigh up, and I suppose it's having the luxury of chatting with whoever the new guy is going to be and seeing where he fits into the plans. If the new guy walks in and goes, Lee, listen, not my plans at all, it's an easy decision for Lee then, isn't it? Whereas if the new guy walks in and says, well, look, this is where I see your role in the team, either number 1 or number 2 striker, it's a harder decision for Lee to leave then, I would say.
It is.
It's got to be better than number 1 at Aberdeen.
When you're mentioning chances created, I've already touched on the fact that we've created on average about 25 chances a game under John Kennedy. I think the average is probably closer to 20 a game across the season. A striker like Lee Griffiths, if he was playing 40 games a season, would score you goals. Simple as that. I mean, he's not been his fittest this season, which has been one of the biggest issues physically, fit that is. And, he's just not been in, and he's never got started this season. Had he been firing on all cylinders, I'm talking about the Craig Gordon, it's all ifs, buts and maybes from day one this season. We could have been having a different conversation entirely. But, this is an interesting point from Moravchik25 on YouTube. On the training ground at 6:30am preparing. That's Eddie Howe. Now, I think if you compare and contrast that to some of the issues we've seen with Lee Griffiths this season, we won't go into them, but it's all around lifestyle and preparation and taking your own body and physical situation seriously. In the modern day, that should be a given for a professional footballer. You might have got away with that even 10 years ago, but not now. You hear stories about, even under Martin O'Neill, that being quite a relaxed scenario. And when Gordon Strachan came in, and Strachan is notoriously a fitness freak, and they were talking about double sessions, and Chris Sutton straight away said, I know my own body, I don't need to be doing this. Situations where Roy Keane comes in and Big John Hartson's eating packets of crisps on the team bus and drinking fizzy juice and all that kind of stuff, full fat juice, all that kind of stuff. We take it for granted because we're not athletes, but I don't think Lee Griffiths is fully bought into that lifestyle. And if someone like Brendan Rodgers comes in, that'll be a shock to him, as it was with a few players, I think. And then when someone like Eddie Howe comes in, again, I just don't think Lee Griffiths would fit that mould. How good would he be at Aberdeen? I think he would be a phenomenal signing for a team like Aberdeen. Coming back to haunt you, yeah, we've had plenty of strikers in the past. In my day, it was always Tommy Coyne. Tommy Coyne was always scoring for Motherwell every time we played them. And he was a striker that we let go for about 300 grand or something like that. Now, last week, Natasha, we were talking to the Celtic FC women's team, and it sparked my own interest. And obviously there was a big game. It was live on Sunday. Women's football is getting far more coverage, and not before time. I think, in 5 and 10 years' time, it's just going to be another fixture that's on the broadcasting list. It's going to be who are Celtic women's playing. I think that's where we're going, and I think that's all for the best. I think you tuned in on Sunday, didn't you, against Glasgow City? Didn't really live up to expectations, though, unfortunately.
I did, yeah. It was frustrating. I think, the team and Fran Alonso himself will acknowledge that the performance wasn't great. But, there's circumstances to be taken into consideration. They haven't played a competitive match in nearly 5 months now, and I know the same will apply for Glasgow City as well. The conditions were absolutely awful. I don't know if anyone else watched it, but it was not prime conditions for a game of football. But it was absolutely excellent to see them back out there playing competitively again. And this is always going to be a tough match. Glasgow City have won 13 leagues in a row. They have been relatively unchallenged. But I think, Celtic and Rangers as well are getting closer now. It has become a bit more contested. So while, this is always going to be a tough game for them, I think they're certainly going to be there or thereabouts, looking at this season, next season, and the coming seasons. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant to see women's football being competitive in Scotland. And it's brilliant to see the media and other broadcasters supporting it. The new highlight show on a Sunday by Sports Scene's absolutely excellent. The more we have podcasts talking about it, like you say, Paul, it's just going to become another fixture that we mentioned. It's going to be another game to discuss, and it's good that it's getting that way. And the more that happens, the more the game grows and the better it gets. So yeah, very positive, and I think definitely taking steps in the right direction. And a lot of people should be looking out for the games that come up on BBC Alba. Tune in, have a watch, and let's help the game grow.
I think so. I mean, obviously Celtic have gone professional. It's a professional football team we have. If you come second, I think you also qualify for the Champions League in Scotland this season. So although Glasgow City are very strong, as are Rangers are strong this season as well, Celtic are still in and about it. There's plenty of fixtures left. And if they get into the Champions League, it's a great advert for Celtic. It's a great advert for Scottish football. You look at the next generation. It's not just your boy who might be a footballer, your girl might be a professional. It's brilliant. I think it's fantastic. I'm buying right into it. Lawrence, there is a fixture this weekend. We are coming up against Livingston. And, games like that, I look at games like that now and I just think we should definitely be using them as an assessment process. We've got to be assessing the players, and whilst we don't have the manager in place, it's going to be difficult. Yeah, John Kennedy is constantly assessing the players. I feel John Kennedy's played it a bit safe since he took over.
Yeah, definitely hasn't changed too much up. As I mean, not even starting two, another game two up top. It was his opportunity to really have a look at strikers, see what's going to work. It's very samey. He may say some of that's down to the personnel he's got at his disposal. He's playing what he can because that's what he's got. We don't have a lot of width. It was good to see Jamesy back and having an immediate impact, probably the best player in the park. But we looked a bit a different team because he does give you that width, which has been a big problem for us. And it's probably why we can get 100 shots over 4 games and such a low return for it, because we don't have the width. We're not stretching the park. So our shots are coming from distance, that they're coming from outside the box, the majority of our shots. And it's maybe down to not having that width in the team, and maybe Kennedy's saying, well, I don't think Johnson's up to it. I've got Jamesy now, he can play wide. Who else is really a wide player in there? So perhaps that's why he's playing it so safe. But for me, I don't know what he's gained by playing Scott Brown the other night.
No, I agree with that.
He's decided to move on. Brilliant. It's Falkirk. Surely it's get Sorrell, get him some more game time, see what he can do. Mm-hmm. Change the formation. 2 up top, he could have went 4-4-2. But yeah, it was just all very samey, which has been probably one of the biggest disappointments.
It is. It's very. You're right. He's played it safe, So for me, between now and the end of the season, Natasha, I agree with Lawrence. Let's get Sorrow in there. Let's make sure that Mikey Johnson's there or thereabout, because he seems to have just dropped off the face of the planet at the moment, as has Near Beaton. So I'm pretty sure he'll be off in the summer. He's still at the club at the moment. He just seems not to get a mention. But that would give you a bit more of a width with Johnson if he was to make an appearance with Forrest on the right. I thought Forrest was one of the best players on the park the other night. And I think El Yunusi, Ayeti, that type of player, we need to assess, are they going to be around next season? And I think you've also got to make a decision on the goalie, on Barkas. I mean, what is the point in playing Bain at this moment in time, other than just giving the guy game time because you want to win the game? Let's assess the goalkeeper situation. Can Barkas have a future? I don't think he can. But, if he doesn't play the next half a dozen games or so, and there is a goalie in there, we won't know about it because we're not even giving him a game, and give him a game behind a settled defence, something that he didn't have the luxury of. How do you think it will go against Livy? Is he going to play it safe, Natasha? Are we going to get a resounding result? Because let's be honest, we need to start getting some results together before we play Rangers in the Cup.
Yeah, to be honest, I think everything that we've seen suggests that he is going to play it safe. I don't think he wants to rock the boat too much. And I think we will see a very similar lineup than we have seen in previous weeks under Kennedy. And I think he will have the cup game in mind. If he tries to keep a bit of a settled squad, getting results until then, maybe he'll see it as not the time to start introducing new players to assess them. And in his defence, Kennedy sees these players every day in training. He can assess them to a degree there. You've got Stevie Wood, he'll see Barkas every day, he'll know what he's capable of. And of course, it's not the same as a match day situation, but it does give them an idea of what these players have and the ability that they have. So it's not like they're not seeing them at all. We're just not seeing them. So I think for me, I'm probably thinking that Kennedy's going to go for a more settled lineup and try and create a bit of consistency in the run up to the cup game. But equally, from a personal point of view, I think I would like to assess some of the squad, but we just have to accept that they are doing that. They're assessing them behind the scenes, and it's just simply that we're not seeing it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as it always is, and we'll be covering it on ACSOM. One final point before we go. Ian Clark, thank you for getting in touch. My uncle, Tommy Coyne. I've got great memories of Tommy Coyne, I really do. I mean, he was a young player who started off with Clydebank. His manager at that time was Sammy Henderson, sold him to Dundee United. Jim McLean, the legendary Jim McLean, bought him for Dundee United. Didn't quite work out, went to Dundee, became a goal machine. Tommy Coyne was a goal machine. And I remember when Celtic signed him for £500,000. What a signing. But he didn't play for a great Celtic side, unfortunately, but I've got some great memories of Tommy Coyne, Ian, so thanks for sharing that with us. Thanks everybody for getting involved on YouTube and on Facebook and Twitter, and we will be back tomorrow at 12:30, unless of course there is an announcement, and then we'll need to dive back on and have an emergency broadcast. But all that's left for me to say in the meantime is thank you, Lawrence Conley and Natasha Meikle, for once again joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.